Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. It is August the 20th, 2025. I just heard that Gervonta Davis is going to have an exhibition in Atlanta against Jake Paul. If the news is right, let's talk about the fight openly here. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Folks, let me just say this diplomatically, right? If Jake Paul is allowed to fight at 190 or higher, then this fight is a mismatch, right? The fight to look at is Gervonta Davis against Pitbull Cruz. Davis is an in-the-pocket fighter who has a problem with guys circling him. Take a look at Davis against Raleigh Romero. Davis is not defensively blessed. Davis's volume is very low in that fight because Davis, an in-the-pocket fighter, was afraid to open up against a guy with a big punch. Folks, Jake Paul has a big punch. They have weight classes for a reason. Boxing is going to have to start realizing that Jake Paul is an ongoing problem for the sport. He's one of the biggest names in the sport. I believe he beats Gervonta Davis if he's allowed to weigh close to what I believe his walking around weight is. Let's remember, this is a guy who fought Tyson and was up in the 220s. If they allow Jake Paul to be at 190, I don't care what Gervonta Davis weighs. Right? Davis, of course, has been fighting at 135. At a certain point, I'm not one of those people who believes that you can just gain weight and offset the weight advantage that an opponent has, right? I'm someone who believes Terence Crawford's weight gain is going to backfire on him against Canelo. Right here, and I applaud both guys for taking the fight. It's a big money fight. This is prize fighting. Gervonta Davis needs to think about paydays, not just boxing fans, right? He's going to get paid here. This is a major event on Netflix, I'm hearing. But just understand, Jake Paul is nothing to be afraid of. He's going to be circling. He's a mover now. He's going to be circling Gervonta Davis. Davis won't be able to keep up with the speed. He hits harder than Gervonta Davis. He's not going to be there to get hit in the ribs like Ryan Garcia was. Right? We're confusing Davis's fights at 135 with the idea that Davis could take on a cruiserweight. Right, folks? It's just not happening. Right? You know, we were talking about the possibility of Jake Paul against Anthony Joshua. I think that's an interesting fight. Understand, there are guys around Jake Paul's weight who I wouldn't hesitate to take over Jake Paul. Right? J.O. Bataya, folks, he has better legs than Jake Paul. That's mover against mover. Only one guy is a hardcore professional boxer. Right here, I have a heavier punching, heavier mover guy who did well in taking Tyson shots. Right? Power's the last to go. And he's fighting what? A 135 pounder? Maybe a guy who gains weight, so he's a blown up what? 147 pounder? And understand, Jake Paul is going to be able to move away from Gervonta Davis on demand. On demand. Because Jake Paul is mobile, the fact that Davis is a southpaw really doesn't matter that much. Because Jake Paul's not going to be in the pocket playing chess with the guy. Jake Paul's going to be circling him and then jumping in and throwing flurries. Understand, Davis can't do anything to prevent the movement. Let's talk about a third Davis fight you need to look at. The Mario Barrios fight. Right? Mario Barrios, tall guy, is outboxing Gervonta Davis. This is the fight where Mayweather had to talk to Davis in the middle of the fight. Right? Unfortunately for Barrios, there's too much Josh Taylor in Barrios, right? Barrios didn't realize, and Barrios is an athlete, that all he had to do was flick a jab and stay outside, right? Made that fight go to a decision. It would have been close. Instead, Barrios decided to duke it out with Davis. Jake Paul's not that silly, right? All Jake Paul has to do is stay outside. Come inside, throw a few big shots. I'm just telling you, Davis won't be able to create a transition game here. Right? You're not going to have prolonged boxing where two guys are in a pocket and they're throwing shots. You're not going to have Philippe Ergovic, David Adelaide, to name a recent fight, right? Where the guys are, in the pocket exchanging. You're not going to have that. You're going to have one guy with a bigger punch circling a lightweight. I want people to think about how ridiculous the visual would be of Ali fighting Gervonta Davis, even if Davis is 147, right? Ali would just be circling him. Ali would have the reach advantage. Ali would have the foot speed advantage. Ali could stay outside, throw jabs because he'd have the reach advantage, right? Even if Davis lands a good left, just understand that because of the size difference, if Paul knows how to turn away from the shots, if the left doesn't hit him on the chin or the temple, Paul should be able to take the shots. So, what we have here is a situation where boxing hardcore people correctly point out that boxing's a craft. That the guy off the street can't just show up against a world-class fighter and compete. Well, that holds true if, in fact, there is a guy off the street. Jake Paul isn't just off the street. Jake Paul has been in the boxing game for years now. And Jake Paul has been committed to the craft, right? He's improved his game. Compare his legs against Nate Robinson to his legs today, right? Everything about him is different. Also, he's had, real people in his corner. BJ Flores, Jalen Love. In other words, he's a student of boxing. There is no man off the street. And even if there was, implicit in the idea that a guy can't just come off the street and beat a boxing champion is the idea that they're within the same weight class. Right? You can't have a situation where some dude who's fought in the 220s, again, that's what Paul weighed when he fought Mike Tyson, is going to be dazed and confused or even remotely afraid of a punch from a lightweight. Right? That's not the way it works. Let me also add the final caveat. We understand that Davis's life has some loose ends. Right? Davis has been in the trouble with the law more than once. Right? We understand that. Let's be frank about it. We also know his game in the ring hasn't involved a big-time opponent in recent months, right? The Ryan Garcia fight was at a catch weight. Garcia had to lose weight, right, for that fight. Since the Ryan Garcia fight, who's the big fighter that Gervonta Davis has faced? He fought Lamont Roach. That's a pocket-centric fight. And let's face it, he lost that fight. It would be clear if there wasn't referee error. Right? Imagine a fighter in the middle of a fight being able to just run over to his corner. Could you imagine that at heavyweight? You're watching a heavyweight title fight and then the champ just runs over to his corner without warning. takes time off in the middle of a round. Well, that happened in the first Roach Gervonta Davis fight. That's Davis's last fight. I don't see Davis, clamoring to get in the ring with Shakur Stevenson. I don't see Davis, and 140's loaded, folks. I don't see Davis clamoring to get in the ring with anybody at 140. Right? Now, I don't blame Davis. If they're going to offer you several times the amount of money you would get fighting a, worthy opponent, if you're going to get that money in an exhibition that's not even going to count on your record, why wouldn't you? Not only that, this is great marketing, right? Even if Davis, and I'm unsure of this because Davis is now in his 30s, but even if Davis is serious about continuing his career after this fight, this Jake Paul fight is an excellent opportunity to get yourself in front of millions of people who may not have seen you box before. Right? That Netflix crowd, they might not be boxing hardcore people, but they're interested in the fight and they'll turn out in big numbers. Right? This is an opportunity to extend your brand. Right? The visual is going to be unbelievably bad. Right? Because Davis is what? And I'm just talking off the top of my head here. 5'5" or so? Jake Paul is going to have at least, what? Half a foot on him? The absurdity of the match is going to be apparent by the end of the first round. Right? You're going to see a much bigger man, and he's going to be jumping around. Again, this is going to be like Ali fighting a 135 to 147 guy. Right? It'd be ridiculous. It is going to be ridiculous. And, as I've said before, Jake Paul has an A-level right hand. Life's unfair. Right? Some guys can throw 95 miles an hour. Who knows why? Jake Paul, even if he had no boxing experience, he has an A-level right hand. Again, I just want to encourage people to look at his fight against Nate Robinson. Right, folks? The punching power is obvious. It's obvious. Right? That's the biggest punch in this fight. It's not anything Gervonta Davis is throwing. Jake Paul has the bigger punch. So I don't think casinos are going to accept bets on this fight. Right? This is the kind of exhibition where at the end of the fight, everyone might just shake hands, and that's the end of it. Right? But don't be surprised if there's a stoppage here. I could easily see Gervonta Davis in his corner thinking to himself, man, this guy hits harder than I thought. Thinking to himself, how am I going to beat this cruiserweight? Right? I could easily see his corner pulling a Sonny Liston and saying, oh, our guy has a bad shoulder. He can't continue. You know how fighters always have that excuse, right? Oh, there's problems with my eye. I'm having problems with vision, right? I could easily see this fight ending by stoppage. If your local casino, particularly if it's a 10-round fight, if your local casino is offering a knockout prop, that's something to consider. Right? If Jake Paul comes out, feels Gervonta Davis's power, thinks he's been hit by a lightweight, not even a super middleweight, right? Or a light heavyweight, if he feels he's been hit by a lightweight and has nothing to fear, why wouldn't he try to close the show? Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours. I'm expecting Jake Paul to win. Those in the court of public opinion, right? Whether they have judges or not. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comment section of this YouTube video. Jake Paul has young legs, folks. This isn't Mike Tyson against Roy Jones, right? You're going to have a bigger man able to just move away on demand. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you in the comment section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.